So, hello everyone. Welcome back to the show. Today I have Deb Terpstra on for the second time. The first time was a very good discussion about What is a Woman, the documentary. And today we have a whole spew of different topics that I think you guys will enjoy. So, thanks for coming on, Deb.
So nice to be here. I'm just thrilled. I feel honored to be back a second time. Thanks, Harley.
Yeah, I think Nate's the only other person who's been on twice. So, there we go.
I love it.
But, but yeah, so, the topics I had in my mind as we were talking kind of are somewhat all in line with the morality of sex and sex in society today, how it's treated, how it's looked at politically, socially, all of these things. And I guess we could start off with this little story, which is we both we went to the Bridge Church together to see this message done by Jeff Winkie on Proposal 3. And in my opinion, he gave a long explanation just regarding the practical and social implications of what Proposal 3 is really trying to implement. And I found it to be a very nuanced discussion. And yeah, that kind of sparked my thoughts on maybe we should do an episode regarding this and then all kinds of other topics surrounding it. So,
Yeah, I think it was a really good sermon, and you had a really great summary just talking about how he didn't just hit on this proposal from the pulpit as a spiritual, or a Christian matter, which I think a lot of people argue against because they're like, hey, I'm not a Christian, so why should that perspective matter to me? But, morals, though being founded often in Judeo Christian values, are something that we all have, especially people that were raised in a moral family are going to have high morals. So, yeah, it's valid to everybody.
yeah, it's not like he just came up there with a Bible and said, it says in this verse you shouldn't do this. And he came at it from a very practical side. Like if someone wasn't religious and walked into that building and heard this talk, I feel like they'd almost they would have been able to resonate heavily. And I really respect that he was able to do that. Analyze it, the social implications, the economic implications, all kinds of different things. And it was interesting. And I guess one of the things that I guess this theme that's kind of undergirding this proposal 3 is this idea that, hey, you should accept this proposal because don't you want rights to reproductive freedom? I hear those words a lot, rights to reproductive freedom. And I analyze this sometimes and I'm like, well, I guess you do have the right to, do whatever you want sexually due to this proposal. But I'm like, does that really give you freedom in its true sense? I I've seen people go down this path and I've gone down the path in some ways with porn, just like, when sex is free and so easily accessible and cheap, I feel like it kind of negates the value of it and it makes you not appreciate it as much and so many other things. I honestly don't think that being able to be promiscuous, as you said, all the time with anyone you want with zero repercussions is even true. I think you're going to face these repercussions and you're almost now more a slave to your desires and your whims than you were before. And I don't find that to be very freeing at all. So that was just an interesting thought I had, but
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And, even one of my favorite podcasts that you did, you were talking about how struggle creates our strength. And I think a lot of people don't realize, like, even there's a lot of peace in accepting the consequences of our choices and reevaluating. I think this is what life is, instead of just like saying, hey, I get a do-over, or somebody cancel whatever mistake I think I made, and uh learning from that experience and saying, hey, you know what, this is the hand that I have been dealt per the choices I made. And what is that going to look like moving forward? You would think, even if you're not a Christian, that this might be how things are supposed to be. So maybe I should, maybe I wasn't expecting to be a parent at 17 years old. But maybe that is the choice that I made now, and I should look into that. Or, um, you know, last night I had posted a TikTok video on my Instagram story about this family that received a baby through adoption for the first time. And I just, like, they were so happy to have this baby. And I just thought, if you don't want your child, somebody else will want your child. Like, somebody else will love and care for that child, and it will be the answer to their prayers. So it's just, I think, like you were saying, Harley, like, it's so me focused. Everyone is so me focused, and they don't think about what is best for everyone involved.
Yeah, seriously. There's this there's this mindset of, whatever's going to make me happy in the moment is the highest ideal I should be striving for. Oh, you know, to hell with anyone's future selves because I care about my 5 to 10 minutes of pleasure. And
Yeah.
you know, there's this thing that Peterson said that I honestly should make a clip of because it's so impactful for me. But he said something like, when you engage in, you know, casual sexual experiences, you not only reduce the other person to just a means to physical pleasure, you actually reduce yourself to that too, because you're now looking at that person as, oh, this person's just going to lead me to this pleasure, and I'm going to do the same to them, and now we're just treating each other as objects, and I don't think that's how humans are supposed to really look at each other. But I feel like in today's flashy dating apps where it's like, oh, it seems so fun and exciting to swipe and meet someone that you just met and have an intimate physical experience with them, and oh, it's so fun and freeing and you'll be so happy. And I feel like people are so short-sighted. They're thinking of, oh, tonight it will be fun. Oh, it'll be fun for the next 10 minutes. But they don't really seem to analyze, what's this going to do to my medium term self and long term self, and then B, what's this maybe going to do to my future partner that I actually want to be with? And I don't know, these questions don't seem to be asked much. And the abortion topic is a complicated one, but I feel like undergirding it all is this discussion that needs to be had about what is the proper way to orient yourself in the sexual dimension. And if you orient yourself somewhat properly, I feel like the probability that you're going to need to have an abortion is going to be lowered. But I don't know, just more thoughts by me. But
Yeah, and I think people they can be really short-sighted. I mean, they are really short-sighted about about what's best for them or what's best for them long term. And that's tough, especially in a younger crowd. I mean, we know brain development doesn't fully happen until 25, and so, you know, I would say for women, like if I was talking to the younger women especially, I would be praying for discernment and to be thinking about your future and your future self. um yeah, like, and it's hard, and especially in this day and age where people are, so like, this is the weird thing about dating apps that I was thinking about. We are reducing each other to objects because we are just pictures on a screen, and you're almost shopping for a person. You're evaluating photos. You don't get to interact with this person, see mannerisms, see how they're responding. I had noticed, even for the short spell that I was on the dating apps, it was nearly impossible to just get somebody to have a voice note conversation. So, and then there's times where, like, I have people that I talk to, but then when I text them, I think, oh, this seems like a totally different person, because texting is a totally different crappy form of communication. Like, that's like, what time are you going to be there? 5 o'clock. Okay, thanks. It's not like, what was life like for you growing up? Tell me what your family, values are, and what are your desires for your like dating experience and the rest of your life. Like, that's not something you can have on a screen you know to get to know somebody. And anybody who's like, oh, we've been talking for 2 weeks and I really like, you don't know anybody. And I feel like the regret and the lack of peace from this like promiscuous lifestyle comes from this thinking like you can't discern because you don't have all the variables to um to do that. So you think you know somebody, and then you get this anguish of like, you decided you knew somebody, so you're going to sleep with them, and then most people I know, like 3 or 4 months later, it's like, oh, that person wasn't the one. And I haven't dated much in the last 10 years, but what I have realized is that if I talk with somebody for 3 or 4 months, I usually figure out, like, you get past the excited stage, real life things happen, you go through some sort of crisis either together or experience how somebody else experiences that. And then it calms down, and then you're much more able to evaluate if this is somebody that you're going to continue to pursue a relationship with. And if you're not, and you haven't had an intimate relationship with them, it is so easy to just say, like, I wish you the best, have a great life, maybe we can be friends, whatever, whatever. And, you're able to move on. And, for women, it saves so much heartache when you're not bonded to somebody in that manner. So, I don't know. I mean, it's taken me a long time to learn as well. And I think sometimes women don't know their worth because maybe they weren't taught their worth. And so, people are always like, oh, set the bar really high. And it's like, well, this is where I was taught to set the bar. So it's kind of like, I don't know, Harley, if you're the same way, but if I go into a room full of people I don't know, I'm always quiet. Like, I'm like, what people are here? What are we talking about? How am I going to, you kind of figure out how you fit into that room. What kind of discussions are we going to be having? You have to like feel out the room. And I just think there's a lot of, right now and hurry and things going on in the world right now. And if people could just pause, kind of think about what you want, what's best for you, you're going to be able to make good choices instead of rash choices, and probably feel like you have more freedom, right? Yeah.
No, yeah, definitely. Yeah, you mentioned a lot of things. I have a few thoughts. I have like 3 thoughts along those.
You
So
should
the
take
first one,
notes.
yeah, I got those. And so yeah, like the first thing you mentioned was something about like, you know, the interaction that you're going to have with someone through a dating app or even through text is just it's going to be subpar to being in the room with someone and it sounds cliche but feeling their energy, you know, seeing if you can really bond with the person. And these days it seems like if a person is attractive looking, maybe they might have a good job or there's like interesting metrics that are used. Whereas if you were in the room with someone, you wouldn't be analyzing them based off the same metrics. And I just, it's like you said, it's shopping based off, appearance. You're putting yourself out there, just a quick still few frames and a few little things about what you do. And
Yeah.
it's just, I don't know. I feel like some people meet on dating apps and it might work out, but yeah, like I just don't know if it's the real natural way to do it because you're not feeling, you know, I feel like there's something that occurs when you're with someone in the same room and you're like, wow, okay, I want to get to know them.
Yeah.
It's not
Like,
about just their attractive level. It's about how they're conducting themselves in the room. It's how they're asking the questions. It's the eye contact. It's like 100 different things you can't even fully explain.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah, because
I
Harley, have you met people that like you're like, oh, if I just saw a picture of them, I wouldn't really think they were attractive. But then you meet somebody, I think about the people I know who are like attractive men, and it's just like, well, why do I find them attractive? Like, and if a picture of them is not what I find attractive, not that they're not physically good looking or whatever, but I think that's what it gets narrowed down to when you're looking at a dating app. You're like, well, I don't know what else they have to offer. So this is what I have to discern.
yeah, exactly. It's like, I feel like guys will just be like, "Oh, if they're hot or not, swipe right or left." Girls, maybe if they're hot, if the guy is, maybe good looking, maybe if they have a good job, maybe if they're tall, maybe I'll swipe right. I don't know. I found this. There's an interesting study that said, I think it's like 15% of the American population is over 6 foot of males, like, or maybe 15 or 20.
Yeah.
And it said like 85% of women on dating apps at least want a man who's over 6 foot. That's just an interesting little stat where it's like we're now shopping for like the perfect person
Yeah.
based off attributes that honestly don't, what's the right word? They don't yield or predict for success in a long-term relationship. It's like, oh, if they, you know, yeah, I don't know. I think what did I hear that were like the biggest predictors of success in a relationship? Something like conscientiousness, growth driven mindset. If both people have a similar, growth mindset, wanting to learn and grow. There's a few others, but it's like height, attractiveness, physical attractiveness. These things are just kind of secondary, but like on dating apps, these are kind of the forefront. These are first dairy in some sense, and that's, I don't know what that's doing to our society, but it is really interesting.
Well, and you think about like all of the, like think about grandparents and people that are together and how sweet they are and they love each other. And it's like, this is a blue haired raisin now. This isn't like she doesn't look anything like who you married, but you absolutely, you're loving her. You might need to be caring for her in the way of, like, you know, the bathroom type stuff or shower type stuff or any, these are things you would, like when my dad was, in the last stages of Parkinson's and stuff too, and my mom was kind of just reminiscing at like, this is not like how I intended our life to go, but she's like, I said in sickness and in health, you know and I just feel like people don't, like I said, they're so short-sighted. They're not thinking about, someday, like this whole like you're gonna be physically beautiful is really such a short stage of life. Like it really is, and it's like you can be attractive for your age or whatever, but it all goes, like it all goes, like so I don't know. I think I was gonna say too that whether you're a Christian or not, I always like in the last 10 years especially, I'd really thought about how people view like the 10 commandments as rules that are like limiting, and God wants to take away our fun. And it's like exactly what you were saying. The freedom is in the discipline. It's the same as, as parenting. You don't let a child do whatever you want. You create boundaries, you have rules. And if society isn't going to create them for our children and for the young adults and for the people that are in society, we have to create them for ourselves to protect ourselves. And that's what my thought would be, my encouragement to women listening is this isn't God saying like you don't have your sexual freedom. He is saying you have freedom in obeying these rules because I know what's best for you, and I know you don't want to have a bunch of notches in your belt that you're gonna have to talk to your future husband about, and he doesn't want you know she doesn't want that for the man that she's marrying either. So um, I know people are thinking about this is what I want right now, but I really think there's a lot of value to limiting yourself and having some discipline and having some foresight and and praying for discernment so that um, you can keep that peace. There's freedom in having peace, and I think there's a lot of turmoil in like a promiscuous lifestyle or making choices that you haven't really thought about the outcomes for.
Yeah, definitely.
Mhm.
I feel like some of the people my age have this idea of like, oh, I don't want to get married. Marriage is a trap. I want to be free to do whatever I want. I want to be free to be with whoever I want, whenever I want. And I'm like, well, you know what occurs when you get married? You're limited to one person, you're kind of stuck with them, but you're also free to learn and grow with them and be as vulnerable and open with them as possible. And you're almost more free because of it. Because you've limited yourself to one person, you're now more free to figure out who you truly are and who they really are. And it's such a it's an interesting like paradox where it's like, you know, it's this idea where it's like because you're putting limitations on your life, you actually have more freedom. It's like you don't want to just I don't know, like a gate off a cliff. Like having that limit right there is actually useful so you don't fall off the cliff. And oh, you're not as free. You can't be like a bird. And it's like, well, yeah, I don't want to fall off the cliff though. I don't know, just different examples where it's like when you limit your you know, when you put stopping blocks in places, you actually become more free, even though technically you might be more limited. But it's an interesting paradox. It's kind of interesting to wrap your brain around.
Well, there's direction comes from putting boundaries in place. And if you don't have any type of rules, you don't like it's like I mean Jordan Peterson talks about too, like people will be like, "Oh, I just want to live a lifestyle where I'm on a beach sipping margaritas." And he's like, "Yeah, for a week, and then you're going to hate it because you're not doing anything and you don't have any purpose." So, I mean, I know, people too who have gone through promiscuous stages as well. And they're like, it ends because it gets really, really old. And I mean, there's no satisfaction, there's no purpose. And, you really start to look at yourself like, what am I doing? You know what I mean? Like, what is the goal with this? There isn't one, you know? So, again, it goes back to, I mean, you talk about this all the time on your podcast, Harley, and I do love that, living a life that has struggle and that has discipline, whether it's, not like, I had mentioned before, like, oh, well, I can just binge. I mean, as an adult, like, oh, I could just binge eat a bunch of junk food if I wanted to, but what do I feel like afterwards? Was that worth doing? What do I learn from this? So, you're free to make mistakes and, maybe like this sounds right, but I don't know if it's going to be right. So I'm going to see. Um, but learning from those mistakes is really, really important. This is how, we grow. We're not supposed to not fail. Um, but I really think looking at, the guidelines, I don't know. I think the older I get, the more I realize there's like answers to everything are in the Bible. It's crazy. It's crazy to me. Like something that was written so long ago, like, and it even like, it has like the best, like motivational quotes too. You know what I mean? Like if you're looking for some sort of inspiration to get you through the day or like, fear not, like it's like, yeah, it's absolutely incredible. So I mean, even if you're not a Christian, there's so much value in learning about Judeo-Christian values. And then, you get to a point where you have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. I mean, you know, I'm doing this Bible study now where we're talking about the Holy Spirit, and you know the speaker is saying how like the Holy Spirit, like gives us the fruits of the Spirit. And one of those is self-discipline. Like, this is something God has given us to be able to use in our lives. And, it's like, here we are just plowing away, trying to figure out what's best. Like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. And it's just like, you have this in you. It's been given to you, to use so that you can have
Truly.
a better life.
Yeah, I agree. Like, there's this phrase, discipline equals freedom, which, you tied into the Holy Spirit. You're kind of gifted the gift of self-discipline. And I really can resonate with that. Like, I feel like sometimes it all just goes back to this freedom thing where it's like, how free do you want to be? Are you really free if every weekend you're you fall victim to your whims and you're enslaved almost to your short-sighted desires, and every time you feel like crap? Or are you more free when you have the discipline to say no and to say, I want better for my future self. I want to be a better version of myself. I'm going to say no to this. I can relate heavily just in the porn dimension. I've actually never really gone down the hookup lane, but the porn lane I've definitely been on. And it's like these past like month and a half, I've been better at just like, no, I want better for my future self. I don't want to have to explain this to, you know, my future partner. You know, I've gotten slowly better at it, and I really think, honestly, it's because of this podcast. I open up and I'm like, oh, I don't want to, but I'm going to, and now it's off my chest, and
Yeah.
I can almost analyze like, okay, what's giving you more freedom? A short term little pleasure, or you know, discipline? So yeah,
And it's going
but
to be beautiful for you to be able to say to your future partner, like, this was a problem I had 10 years ago. You know what I mean? The more that you practice this discipline, one of my favorite things to practice, like being mindful, and where you're like, when willpower is going to fail you on something, is to use the phrase not an option. And that means that whatever it was that I was partaking in, like, I'm promising myself, and I did this when I was a smoker. I was a cigarette smoker from the time I was 19 till the day I found out I was pregnant with my daughter. And I quit, and I just told myself, like, starting up smoking again is not an option. Like, it, and I will do anything I possibly can to never light up a cigarette again. And it was just the mindset that I had. And so, yeah, I probably replaced that hate behavior a couple of times with things that were maybe food or whatever. And it takes a little bit to figure out, like, what are good substitutes for this this aggression, this thing that's like, that's troubling me. But and then, I mean, to be honest, I went through, I started up smoking again when I was going through my divorce, and it was only a couple of cigarettes a day. But I had, like, I've been talking with this guy, and I had been getting into bodybuilding, and he was like, you're doing all this health stuff. And he's like, you're still smoking, and that doesn't even, like, it just doesn't make sense in the mix. And I said, yeah, you're right. And that was in 2012, like right before 2012 in January. It was like right, like a New Year's or whatever. And I just was like, yeah, you're right. And I just was like, I'm not gonna ever do this again. And that was when I, like, I started, like, I'm not going to go get cigarettes when life gets stressful, which is usually what people do. Something tragic happens or whatever. And I never smoked again. I never did it. So, and I didn't use any patches or anything else. But when you tell yourself that it's not an option, um, you know, you're not going to break this promise to yourself. Or if you do, you have to deal with the consequences of that. So it's like, what are all the other things that I'm going to try to do first before I fall back into this horrible habit?
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
amazing that you had that resolution and that will. Very awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, like yeah, this idea of like it's non-negotiable. It's not an option. I have this same thing when it comes to the gym in some sense. It's like it's non-negotiable. I'm going to go. Today I'm not interested in going. It doesn't even matter how much motivation you have. This is all in lines with like Jocko Willink, David Goggins type people where it's like I'm not motivated every day. Most days I'm not even motivated. But it's not about how motivated you are or how, you know, willing you are to go. It's do you have the discipline to just go? Do you have
Yeah.
the discipline to negotiate with yourself? And I actually, in regards to the sexual dimension, I live with a guy named Nate who, honestly, in my opinion, he's got one of the strongest wills slash the biggest discipline I've seen. He actually, he's the kind of person who can, if he walked into a bar, he could easily get with a woman like that. He's got the confidence. Women like, look up to him but every time he's like, "Nope, not doing it." And like it's amazing to see and it's like non-negotiable. It's not an option. I will hate myself the next day. I will hate myself for the rest of my life. Not
Yeah.
an option. And like it's all in line with this similar like if you're able to say no and negotiate for your future self,
Yeah.
I feel like your life will just be better. And I think it all also helps being open and honest about what my whim might be, whether my whim is wanting to go watch porn, not wanting to go to the gym, etc. Because I have people in my life like Nate or others where I can say, "Oh, I really feeling like doing this," or "I really don't feel like doing this." Having that accountability is super useful too. So, in my opinion, I don't think anyone can really do it alone. I think both of us go see a counselor, which is just another testament. Like being able to be open about, man, I really wanted to do this. I didn't want to do this, but I did, or you know, having someone you can really truly be open with, I feel like is one of the bigger helpers in getting over these obstacles and being better at saying no. And so, yeah.
Well, and as much as like, there's so much I don't know if it's more prominent now or if people are just more open about it, but I feel like there's a lot, or if we're just more aware of things because of social media. It could be all of these factors, but I feel like most people should try their hand with some sort of therapy at some point. I mean, even it's like if you're making repeat mistakes or can't find direction in your life or have relationship problems or whatever, I think you need to look inwardly and find out what your contribution is, what kind of, like I said, what kind of repeat behavior is going on, and um and what you can do about that. And maybe it is a lot of just like introspection. Maybe I just need to take a step back. I was talking with my therapist earlier, and I was saying how amazed I am how amazed I am at my daughter, because she's 17, but most of the time when I'm talking to her, I just feel like I'm talking with another adult human being. And she talks about things at school, and I said to my therapist, I said, I feel like where a lot of people are like in the middle of a crowd and like there's a fight going on and it's crazy and I don't know what's happening. I said, I feel like Anna is like outside of it watching, and she's going, oh, that's what's happening in this right there. And so like she's not in the mix of things, but she's aware of what is going on. And I think a lot of us could gain from just taking that step back and going like, where is my place in this? What do I see going on around me? Is this something I need to be involved in? Is it something I need to be concerned about? And just awareness, like there's just an awareness, and from that you can get a lot of peace. Whereas if you're in the middle of the fight, you're going to be panicked and anxious and trying to survive.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, like I feel like let's see. I have a few thoughts. I'm trying to debate where to go. It's I had a mind blank, but either way, the thing I was thinking of while you were talking is this idea that, man, where was I trying to go? Okay, yeah, finally I got it. Where okay, yeah, like w- what do I want to be associated with on this earth? Like who am I as a person? Like if you were to look back and say, okay, who have I been on this earth? What do people think of me? If you're a person who's gone through multiple hookup sessions, or if you're a person who is currently doing this or is debating doing it, I there's this question I ask myself where it's like, who is Harley Seelbinder? What do people want to think of when they think of Harley Seelbinder? Is Harley Seelbinder the person who, treated women, as objects? Or was he the person that didn't do that? You know, Having this podcast actually is an insane accountability for myself where it's like, I know a lot of people listening probably don't have a podcast, but it's like, it all still somewhat applies where it's like, whoever's listening, if you ask yourself, who is my first name, last name? Who is this person? Is this the person that's walking down this path? When you're 80, do you want to say, okay, Harley Seelbinder was the person who, had hooked up with 60 chicks and, you know, had a lot of fun while doing it? I just, I just don't want to be that person. I don't want to be associated with that activity. I don't want any woman to be like, oh, see my podcast and be like, this man, he's a fraud. He treated me like shit. I don't want that. I and I feel like people can ask the same question, like, you know, what do you want to be remembered as? Do you want to be remembered as the person who had the discipline to make your life better, or were you the person who's just like everyone else, falling victim to, the whims of your biology? And so I guess it's just this challenge. It's like, who really do you want to be on this earth? Do you want to be the person who is extraordinary or just ordinary? And
Yeah.
so, yeah,
Yeah. It is funny because we were talking about that too. I feel like a lot of what I'm going through right now is like Anna going off to college, and now like I for a long time it had been like, how do I like what is the second half of my life going to look like? How do I make the most of it? And I think it was putting a lot of pressure on me, like this has got to be spectacular. I have to leave my mark. And really it kind of goes back to like one of my favorite quotes is a Mother Teresa quote that says, if you want to change the world, go home and love your family. And I think it starts with just the little things that you're doing on a daily basis. And if everybody would just do that and almost like not be so concerned about like what is your mark going to be, and I said too, like I always think about that there are people that they have menial jobs, they're kind, they raise good children, whatever, they just live their lives. They're not remembered by the world, but they are remembered by their family, and they make a huge impact on those that are close to them. So it's tough, right? We live in a society where everything is broadcasted, everybody knows your business. It's really hard to have anonymity. But there are people that are doing that every day. Think about the icons that you see on social media. For every one of those, there's millions of followers. Those are the people that are changing the world because they're the ones that are doing, just living their lives on a daily basis. So I think focusing less on how you want to be remembered by the world and more about how you want to be remembered by those that love you and are close to you on a daily basis is going to have a better community outcome for the world than focusing on like what great thing am I going to do. You know what I mean?
definitely. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah, like in some sense, your close family and friends are in some sense the world to you. So it's like, how I don't know. It's just, I guess, definitions. But yeah, I totally agree. It's like, how do you want to be remembered by your friends, family, your high school, classmates, anyone? It's like, do you want to be the positive impact that motivated people to be better, or were you a person that was a negative influence who brought people down? And it's these are questions we can all ask, but
Yeah.
yeah.
And I always think about too, like, there, if you can really take the pressure off, if you think about how finite this life is, and again, it goes back to, my Christian faith is just like this life is, I feel like my purpose was to break cycles in my family, to raise a child that was, healthy and happy, and is going to be able to someday be married and raise productive members of society as well. And so it really takes a lot of pressure off of me to do more. You know what I mean? And when you don't have that pressure to, because I think we can get really caught up, especially like Harley, you're that type as well. Like, what more can I be doing to make myself healthier or work on, um, you know, myself now for my future self? And you can, create a lot of anxiety with that too, constantly wanting to be better and not just being okay right now. You know what I mean? Like, it's enough for today. Like, you've done enough. Yeah. So it's been a balance for me of when to step on the gas pedal, when to take rest breaks, when to evaluate. And, because I feel like a lot of times in life, we just are kind of panicked. Like, you got to do more. So much is expected of me. Can't take a break. Like, you know, I got to do everything that I was supposed to do today. We're kind of hard on ourselves about, like, accomplishing our to-do list, because it's so gratifying when we get everything done, but I mean, tomorrow is another day and there's another to-do list. So
No, yeah, well said. Yeah, it's kind of hard sometimes to strike the balance of, getting something done, taking, like you said before we recorded, taking time to just breathe, be at peace,
yeah,
recognize that things are going to be okay. It's an interesting balance.
yeah, yeah. that
But
that peace thing is huge, though. I think about that a lot, that um things that, recognizing, like, it's kind of like the analogy I said before. If you can step outside of things, you can really evaluate if something is causing you turmoil or bringing you peace, and if that is a road that you need to go down. Yeah.
yeah, I kind of want to bring it back. You were mentioning something that was interesting that ties in with this, like, you know, idea of like, are you going down the right path? If you're looking at some yourself objectively, are you really doing what's best? And one thing that, I guess, going back to like hookup culture or, sex in general, what happens when you do engage in physical activities with someone is something called oxytocin kind of just floods your brain. It's such a positive emotion, you know. You feel so happy, but in some sense you're blinded at the same time. The positive characteristics of the other person are amplified, the negative characteristics of the other person are de-amplified. Oh, they're fine, they're good enough. And in some sense, you can't even look at the situation objectively when you engage in, something physical with someone, especially if you don't even know them that well. And like you said, it's like, oh, 2 or 3 months later, oh, they didn't work out, but they're kind of heartbroken because they engaged in physical activities. And I I don't know, it's interesting because these days people will jump right to the physical
Hmm.
and get emotionally attached and won't look at the situation objectively. They might be with that person for a little bit when in reality, if they, I asked myself this question when I was dating my girlfriend. If we wouldn't have had sex so early, would we have dated as long? And that's an interesting question to ask because it's like, you know, oxytocin is insanely blinding. And, I don't think you can really be objective when you're under the influence of oxytocin. It's really hard to be objective. And I kind of just tying back to like, I don't even think it's hard to be at peace, like going back to what you're saying, when you are flooded with something that's blinding you. It's hard to be at peace when you don't even fully know yourself, or if you can't open up about what you're doing. Oh, this is a kind of a fun secret. I don't know. I feel like that can happen to people where it's like, it's so blinding. They won't tell anyone about it. they're really not at peace. They feel happy, but in some sense, they're just the opposite of free because you're just enslaved to, not an addiction to oxytocin, but you're just enslaved to the feeling of that, you know, connectedness. And I think tying back to another thing you said finally, you said like, what are people actually really wanting when they're engaging in these activities? They're not actually wanting the orgasm release in some sense. What they're really wanting is the connection with another person. They're wanting to have that intimacy with someone, share that with someone, and I feel like when you jump into the sexual dimension without trying to get intimate first, I feel like you're just running the risk of, you know, you're running so many risks. I don't even fully know, but you're blinding yourself to so many red flags or I don't know. It's interesting. It's hard to think objectively when you're doing that. And, you know, someone
I
who might listen to this would say, well, go ahead, go ahead.
No, I just I want to say like I'm really proud of you for just putting this together, like actually contemplating all of this because I don't think a lot of people do. I think they get, caught up in the direction that the crowd is going. This is what we're doing right now, and they don't think about their behavior or the consequences of their behavior. But you're absolutely right. It's like two things I was thinking of. One, you sleep with somebody, it's like having a tether to them. Like you're attached to them and in and it's hard to see anything objectively because you always have this person that is on your mind, in one way or another. You're thinking about, you think they love you, you think you love them. It's not real, but it's like it's not real. It's in the same way, kind of like, if somebody was like drunk all the time going through life, it's like, oh, well, I'm so happy and life is so great. And it's just like you have numbed yourself to bad things, how to react in situations accordingly, how to respond. It's the same type of way, um, it's the same type of a drug, so I would, like I said, I really encourage women, especially, to protect yourselves. Like, it's, you're very valuable and you're worth someone getting to know and talk to and open doors for you. And, whatever the things are that you would expect from someone, ask more of men to be gentlemen, and they will have to comply because they don't have any other choice. You know, we as women really set the bar for society. And going back to what you had said before, you wanted to talk about birth control a little bit too, is something
Mhm.
else that affects hormones. And we both know, we've seen some of the some of the talks and some of the research, like Jordan Peterson too talks about how women in different stages of their menstrual cycle, when they're fertile, find very masculine, manly men attractive, and when they're not fertile, are finding more I would say more feminine men, or more, I don't know what you would say, wimpy men, whatever it is. So now, if you have a society of women who are on birth control, suppressing their, ovulation and suppressing their fertility, we're going to be creating a society of emasculinized men. And it's a problem. It's a problem because I don't know. I mean, I even think about, like, here China is trying to create more masculine men, and here we are. It's almost like this. I mean, I don't want to get into a whole conspiracy theory, but like it's almost like, is this part of the plan? Like, somebody should be stepping back and looking at this. This is a real problem. So, and I'm not saying, like, women, if you're on birth control, it's definitely something you need to talk to your doctor about or whatever. But you know, I mean, I was on it for a very short time when I was younger because I have endometriosis, and I think doctors still do this sometimes when you have different fertility problems. They put girls on birth control, but I would encourage people to seek alternatives if you're being put on birth control for the sake of managing heavy periods or this type of thing. There's so many other things that you can do, adjusting your lifestyle. That's more difficult than a pill. But I think long term, when you start messing with your hormones like that, you're messing with how you see people and the world. And cumulatively, um, it could be very bad.
Yeah, you sum that up so well. Like, like I heard this thing where it's like, women who, when they're not ovulating, they're emitting less, estrogen, which actually men can sense in the air. It's like it's almost like a scent in some sense. And then that almost incentivizes them to, you know, be more manly and boost their testosterone. And but these days, like you said, I go to Western Michigan University. It's like one of the largest like STD statistics. It's one of the highest rates of STD in Michigan. I think it's like the second highest. And it's interesting to analyze this. And I've gone to a few bars and I see these people and I'm like, the probability that most of these chicks are on birth control is high. And I'm like, and it goes back to this idea of like nowadays sex is so cheap and free. 100 years ago, or 70 years ago, you know girls didn't give out their body for free like this ever. Men had to truly earn, you know, the right to a woman, you know. And these days it's like men don't really have to strive at all. They could be a weak, pathetic man, but a woman will easily say yes because it's free. There's no consequences. And it's just this double-edged sword because nowadays women are not, they're not actually aiming for the men that they truly should be with because the hormones are skewing what reality is and who the right match might be. And now men have this like, well, I don't have to try as hard. I don't have to hit the gym. I don't have to better myself because no matter what, I can still get some sex. And it's just like it's incentivizing men to not really strive for more. And I feel like women, you know they feel like they're doing something good. Oh, I have rights over my body, but it's like I really think you're enslaving yourself to your desires. And what is this going to do to your body long term? Like what happens? I don't know the research on like how does this impact when you actually want to have a kid? It's interesting. There's so many implications, and like you said, there's other options. I feel like there's this interesting thing where it's like a woman can really only get pregnant like 6 or 7 or 8 days out of the month, typically. I think that's somewhat true. And it's like, you know, if you're in a situation where you don't want to get pregnant, maybe have the discipline to, track your cycle. Like my mom actually talked with me a lot about this, which is strange. Like I tell my friends about this and they're like, "Your mom talks to you about this?" I'm like, "Yep, my mom is open as can be." And I actually like that because I've learned a lot. But she was like, "Yeah, I had this book and I kept track of, when the cycle was occurring, when was a danger zone, don't be physical in this time of the month, when they were oh there's ways around it. And like you said, a pill is so simple, but like in my opinion, when in life is the easiest option the best option? I just don't see it as the best option for a lot of people. And I don't know, what is it doing to our society? It is such an interesting question. It honestly kind of terrifies me. I'm like, in some ways, it's like, what is this doing to men? Like, where are the men that are standing up and, being courageous? And where are the women who are saying no and being disciplined and, all of these things? So it's just an interesting reality. And I guess it's kind of skewed because I'm involved in the university that has a huge STD rate, huge sexual, just so many people are having sex. At Western, they were giving out condoms right in orientation day. Oh, here's some condoms. And I was just like, what? It shocked me heavily a few years ago when that happened. But whew, I don't know what this is doing to our world, but I don't know if it's very good.
Yeah, it sounds like it's not very good. And I think that, like I personally had, so after my little like few weeks on Hinge, I was on Bumble briefly, but Hinge mostly. I kind of went through, it was like first there's like hundreds of people to choose from, and then it's getting less and less and less, and finally, it was just like there's no like, oh, I looked through everybody. And I have a friend of mine that I talk to pretty regularly. He's a really great guy, but not somebody that I would date. And we had talked about our dating experiences. We've talked about it a lot, and I think that I mean I had come to the conclusion. I was like, I'm off the apps now. I had decided like there wasn't anybody that checked off all the boxes for me. And so and I mean going back to what we had said too, I feel like it's so unnatural, and I didn't really have high expectations for it anyways. It mostly just was like a very odd learning experience, and moving on. But I it really made me think like um, talking to some of these guys and whatnot, I was like, it made me think about myself. And I guess that's what I would say with a lot of the women out there, because we don't always know like how to value ourselves. But, when you start thinking about what you want in another person, and I think, like I'm an articulate person, I'm smart, like, I like think about the things that you like about yourself and what you have to offer in a relationship. And I just thought, um, I don't think what I'm looking for is there right now, and that's okay. Like I don't need to, like especially at my age, like I don't need to date for the experience. Like maybe when you're in your 20s, you're going to go out like on dates for the experience, and I don't mean having sex with people for the experience. I mean actual dating. At my age, I know what I want, and I'm not trying to create a family with somebody either. So it's kind of it's different. I'm not, looking for someone who's going to be a father to my children or something. So to me, it was just like I have a lot of peace in my life. I have a lot of things going on. I have a lot of things I still want to do with my life, and I can do those things whether I have a partner or not. So I think settling is not the answer. Um, and I think just not, and this is easier said than done, maybe, especially for a younger person, but not worrying about it. Certainly don't get caught up in the culture around you. That's not going to get you anywhere. Like Harley, what you're saying, and I love that you have Nate to keep you sort of accountable and stay on the outskirts so that you can have your social experiences, but not engage in some of the social activities that are going to be a detriment to your health physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. So
Yeah. Yeah, truly. I
yeah, I follow your piece, right? I really think there's a lot of value to that because, you know, God has given us a conscience. He's given us this gut to know when, and if you are in turmoil over something, it's not for you. Like that's not where you're supposed to be. That's not where you're supposed to be putting your energy. So, even if you can just step back a little bit, um, especially people at your age, like there's no rush. I know you hear it all the time, but there's no rush, you know. And there's no rush to keep making mistakes over and over either because, you know. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, just like I'm just thinking of like an interesting challenge for people listening. It's
Hmm.
I know I know some of my friends, so Nate specifically, when he first was dating one of his girlfriends, you know, he would say no in the sexual dimension. And honestly, I think he's a bit of an anomaly these days. I just don't know a lot of people my age who are guys who say no. But,
Yeah.
in some sense, he was almost looked at like a freak from his girlfriend and the girlfriend's friends. Oh, he doesn't love you because he doesn't sleep with you. Oh, all of this. And it's like, you know, that's just, in my opinion, I feel like he was loving you more than you realized because he was wanting the best for his future self, your future self, etc. And I guess an interesting challenge is well, a few. First is I don't know if you're a girl and you're with a guy who whenever you hang out, his main objective is to get in your pants, and is that truly a person that cares about you and really loves you? Asking yourself that question, like, is this person really want the best for me, or not, because I feel like I know a ton of guys who I don't even respect, because I'm like, I can tell when they talk, they denigrate women. Their main goal is, oh, well, I can't wait to,
Yeah.
hook up with some random chick. And I don't respect people like that, and I don't think women should either, because, you know, ask yourself that question: who you're with or who you're debating, hanging out with tonight. Really, are they a person that truly wants the best for you? And I guess on the other side, when it comes to being a man, it's like we live in a culture where most guys will just say yes, or, maybe be the forceful people trying to, you know, engage in all this. But I don't know, trying to be different than everyone else, trying to have the discipline to say no. I feel like when you say no to those kind of situations, the women will actually be more and more interested in you, like more intrigued in some ways. Like, huh, this guy actually, he's not like other guys. Wow, he's saying no to this. I was offering, and wow, I'm kind of now more interested in him because he said no. It's like, uh,
Yeah.
it's just an interesting. I'm actually challenging myself because, I want the next time this ever occurs to me, I want to be the person who's like, I'm different than any other guy you've been with. I'm saying no right now because I know that it's just not going to be wise. And yeah, that's just interesting challenges for people. And so
Yeah.
yeah.
I I love that, and um I think women need to put themselves in healthy situations. And so this also goes back to expecting more, like, you know, uh like, hey, do you want to hang out? Or, putting alcohol in the mix really can cause, I mean, obviously just lowers inhibition. So I would say if you're going out on a date, I would not be, I mean, I've even had this with, like, dating apps, or even talking with my friend who is dating. He's always meeting girls for, he'll meet a woman for drinks or whatever. And I'm like, that is an awful first date. Like, maybe coffee, or going for a walk somewhere so you can get to know somebody. Like, I love something like that that doesn't really have to, like, maybe a first date of going out to dinner is pretty intense, and you have to, like, if it's going bad, you spend a lot of money, you're sitting through, like, a whole dinner or whatever. But going for a walk in a park somewhere can end at any time because there's no expectations. Meeting somebody for coffee can end at any time. I feel like, women need to put themselves in healthy situations for dating progression, because you set the bar with what you're expecting from a man from the very beginning by setting that. So you put yourself in a safe place first to find out about this person. And then really trust your gut with it. And it's okay to say, you know what, red flags came up, and I don't need to, and I also would encourage people, like, to, like, try not to do the ghosting thing. It's really, really hard to say, hey, I'm not interested in you. Um, but you can leave it at that. Like, you say, I don't have to explain myself. I'm just not interested. And that is a healthy way to end that. And you can just move on rather than, I mean, we've all been ghosted in some way or another, I think. And it's, you just have so many questions, like, what did I do or whatever. But my other thing too is, ladies, if a guy is trying to hook up with you and you are sensing that, like you said, Harley, just let it go, because it's not you he wants, it's that he wants to have sex, and he will move on to the next girl to see if she is available to it. I mean, I remember back in the day at the bars seeing guys go from girl to girl to girl until they finally found, somebody that they were going to get to go home with them. So, I mean, if that's the goal, it's not you, you're not valuable to them. It won't mean anything to him at all. So, I protect yourself in that way. And I love that, Harley, that you're, challenging people to set the bar, because really you're not losing anything. Um, you're not losing out on anything, and you're definitely saving yourself from a lot of, um, people might call it an experience, but it's a lot of pain and heartache. So, and the whole thing, I mean, I've heard that about people too who have saved themselves, and, you know, they get called freaks, or like, oh, you're not going to have any type of experience, or whatever. Like, there's all kinds of things that people say, but, you know, for, people who have been in healthy adult monogamous relationships, I've been married. um it it doesn't really come down to that. A healthy relationship in all aspects has great communication, and um, that will translate into all aspects of your relationship. So don't let society fool you, brainwash you into thinking that it knows what's best for you. Like I said, I go back to what I know God designed for me. And, I know that I have made mistakes and I've messed up in ways, but it also just shows me that He knows what's best for me. So, yeah.
Yeah, definitely well said. Kind of tying in this idea of communication. I heard something from Peterson. He did this series on marriage, which I honestly found to be amazing. It's on Daily Wire, so you kind of have there's a paywall, but man, I have this second account called Life Changing Clips where I post clips of Peterson and others, and I'm gonna be clipping up this marriage series. So I'll either way. But one thing he mentions in here is, you know, if you are unable to if you're unable to talk about the sexual activities that you're engaging with the other person, if it's too awkward for you to even mention it to them, or if it's too awkward to for you to mention together, if it's just something you do and then are unable to discuss, in some sense, that's an indication that you guys do not have an, a relationship that is deep enough to even go down that path. If you're unable to even talk about the things that you're about to do, that's an indication that there's not enough intimacy there for you to have sex and that it's going to be cheap. And, like when you first meet a person, there's no way in heck you're going to be saying, I like it when you do this. Please, let's have a 10-minute discussion about how I want to be satisfied in this way, the things I like, the things I don't like. I don't think you're going to be able to do that with someone you just met. And, another thing is, are you able to explain what you're doing to the people around you? Like, if you're just keeping if you're doing these things but you're unable to talk about it, these are just indications that maybe what you're doing you don't respect, but you're just kind of hiding. But two just interesting things, like if you're unable to talk about what you're engaging in, maybe that activity is not aligning with who you really should be. It's just interesting to think about.
Well, and it really, like you said, I think it, things have become so cheapened. Like, it's funny, not funny, haha, but it's funny that you have women saying, like, talking about dating apps or whatever. Like, if a guy asks, it brings up sex in any type of way, I immediately, swipe left or whatever it is. It's sad that you have to say that. Like, of course, like, you don't talk about sex on a first date. That just shows you the level of like, what we have placed sex, like, this is something we talk about. Like, you talk about how you were raised and where you came from, and I mean, to me, and this was another challenge with the dating apps, is like, um sometimes I would get like approached that way, and I'm like, I finally ended up putting it on my bio. I'm just like, I'm not here for a hookup. I am a Christian. I'm actually a practicing Christian, because it's really was disheartening to me to have people like, well, it says Christian in your bio, but you're not abstaining from sex, so you're still and hooking up with people. And it was really sad to me because I just thought, oh, I thought this is what we do. Like, this is part of our label. Why is it like okay? Like, why is this the rule? Like, why is this the rule? Like, well, I just like to, it's like, it's like saying, well, I just like to kill people on the weekends. You know what I mean? Like, oh, we can't do that, but we can just violate our own bodies on a regular basis. That's just like, I don't know. It, like I said, it's the brainwashing of society and the preaching of what is the phrase that they women's reproductive health? What is it called? Reproductive rights. Women's,
Yeah,
yeah,
freedom, reproductive freedom, rights to reproductive freedom.
yeah. It's just so like that doesn't even mean anything. Like when you break it down, like it doesn't even mean anything. You know. So like yeah, and that's another thing too. It's just like think about what you're, and I also like think about what you're taking in. One of the things that I love that you had talked about social media, Harley, and so I put an app a time limit on all my apps, and so I actually have to put in my passcode in order to log in on a daily basis, like after 15 minutes. And it's not just to prevent me from being on the app so long, but to also raise that mindfulness of like I am now taking the time to look at Instagram. You know what I mean? And I just would encourage people to do that as well, because you can really get lost in the amount of time that you're spending on social media and you're taking it all in. Like, and it's a lot of garbage. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, like yeah, I feel like Instagram in some senses, or just social media in general, women on there, they're maybe craving intimacy and attention from a man, but then they'll post pictures that are promiscuous to get a lot of clicks or likes, while men are, craving intimacy and connection with someone. They can't find it, so then they go into Instagram and it's like, oh, maybe this is, maybe I can, somewhat be intimate with this person. And I honestly, I guess a final thing I could bring up, but not final, but it kind of reminds me of this thing like OnlyFans, where it's like, women, it's like, I have, financial freedom because I am an OnlyFans chick. I'm making money. I'm free to do whatever I want, no boundaries. But guess what? I, you're now, I don't know, what is that going to do to your future relationship with your partner? And then also, what is that doing to men who are craving something intimate, yeah, than paying money for something that's cheap and not intimate? It's so interesting what our society is pushing as normal and pushing as healthy or free. And I just, being able to stand up against that is
Yeah.
something that we all should do. It's
Well,
interesting. Whew.
I feel like the whole summary of this is just like, it's kind of about earning things. And I don't know, like, what makes something valuable, uh like, or what cheapens, what cheapens something. And I think a lot of what we've been fed in our society, it is just has caused a lot of like brainwashing to that. And I think we haven't stopped to question, like, is this normal, is this natural, is this good? Like, I think about it a lot with like fertility type stuff where it's like surrogate parents and all these things. And it when you have huge things like that where it's like, oh my gosh, like you could just create a baby like from people and put it in somebody else, and like it's a whole thing, then you always go, well, just because we can, should we? And I think that question should be asked with a lot of these things. Like, well, just because I can find somebody on Hinge, should I? Do you think that's the best way for me to be spending my time, like shopping for a person? Or should I be connecting with people in person and having meaningful relationships where, maybe like somebody will meet Harley through Nate, through, you know what I mean? It's just like that is going to be a much better, a much more organic way. I don't know. It's really tough. It's not like we can just change the direction that the world is going, but I like what you said too, Harley, about just like, I'm going to try to be different. And I think that is, I mean, like, as a Christian, that's what we're called to be, right? And it's so hard. It's so hard to say, like, you get a lot of pushback. That's not loving. That's not tolerant. That's not, you know, that's not what we're doing. Like, it's like, that's not what we're doing right now. And it's like, that's what I'm going to do, that's what I'm going to do.
No, yeah. Yeah, like the overall message here is what is normal in society and what is accepted and what is easy is not necessarily the best thing for you. Sometimes taking the harder path, being different, and being willing to say no and standing up for what you truly believe, I feel like it will lead you to a better partner. It will lead you down a better life. And I feel like you're just going to be way more at peace, way more free, and way less enslaved to your desires. So,
Yeah,
so yeah. And honestly, I'd say that's a pretty good place to stop.
I think it is. I think it
Well,
is.
well, thanks for coming on, Deb. I truly think these discussions need to be had more. Even if just like one person listens to this, I really think we can make an impact on how they're thinking about it. Maybe someone is debating hooking up with someone, and then they see this on Instagram or wherever, and they're like, hmm, maybe I shouldn't, or maybe it'll just make them think. And who knows? Even just if no one listens, I learned a ton from this, so I'm really glad we did this.
Yeah, I always appreciate your insight and your perspective. And I love that we're coming at this from, you know, different generations, but the connection is still the same. You know what I mean? We're still coming from it from a base of core values that are the same. And I appreciate the time so much. I love it.
Awesome. We'll have to do it again for
Yeah.
round 3.